How much does a producer make?
Did you go to school? What did you study?
What's a showrunner? I've never heard of that.
What does a director do?
What's the best part of your job? How do I get in?
Who do I need to know?
It's time to ask your questions.
We're here for you.
Welcome to 101, a podcast for young women interested in careers in film and TV.
We'll sit down with industry professionals, ask them your questions, and get the answers you need to know.
101. It's a beginning. Hey, everybody. Welcome to 101, a podcast. And today we are so lucky to be talking to Bianca Butti. Did I do it?
Yeah, you did it.
Yes. Bianca, her background is Italian. Your grandfather lived in northern Italy and then came here?
Actually, he moved to Switzerland, which is where my dad is from. So I'm half Swiss.
Wow.
With like Italian influence.
Got it.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
So Bianca, I'm just going to dive right in. What do you do?
I'm a DP. I'm a director of photography, and I also work as a camera operator. So I do kind of both of those things.
And just for our listeners, like, what's the difference between those two?
So a director of photography is in charge of the overall look of whatever project you're doing, is in charge of the camera department and the lighting department, and works directly with the director to, accomplish their vision. And a camera operator works within the camera department, just operating the camera. So working directly with the DP and the director to hands-on use the camera to accomplish shots that are discussed or worked on. And a lot of the times as a DP, you're also the camera operator. So there is, when you get into like union stuff in the States, a DP must have a camera operator unless you get an exemption from that. So, but in Europe, it's different. It's like most DPs are operators.
Do you have strong feelings? Like, do you have preferences? Do you prefer to have someone operating the camera for you or when you're DPing? Or do you kind of miss operating it yourself?
I love operating. When I'm DPing, I usually operate, but occasionally I'll have an operator. And when that has happened, it's a relief to, work with another operator and then be able to just focus on lighting, and I can watch the monitor and all of that stuff. So I kind of see both things are good. It comes down to preferences and budget,
What kind of projects have you worked on?
I've shot a couple of indie features. I've shot a bunch of shorts, music videos. I did a lot of docuseries work over the course of the last 10 years. I've shot a couple commercials, stuff like that.
Was there a moment for you where you just knew that this was the industry for you, that cinematography was your calling?
Yeah, I've always been obsessed with movies since I was little, rewatching, memorizing things, stories. It's always been a big interest for me. And when I was in high school, I took a photography class, like a black and white, print your own photography. And I got really into it. I got really into framing. I got really into taking pictures. I got really into developing my own photographs. So it was really kind of a love for photography with kind of like this background in film. And when it came time to go to college, I was like, I'm most interested in this. So I decided that I was going to go to film school and still continue with photography. I'm also interested in painting and drawing too. So I took courses in all of those places. And then it was in college. I actually remember the moment where I volunteered on this indie movie that was shooting in San Francisco, which is where I went to school. And I was a PA, I watched the truck, and they were bringing in equipment and shooting stuff inside. And I was like, this is so cool. And then the next day I came back, worked more. And then they ended up working this super long day. And the second AC had another job that they had to do the next day. So they had to leave and they asked me to be the second AC. And I was like, yes, absolutely. So I got to do the slate and work with the people in the camera department. And I was just like, my mind was blown. I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever done. All these people are awesome. And that was just kind of it. I was like, I'm sold.
Wow, what an opportunity.
What were you thinking when you were that age? Were you kind of freaking out a little bit? Were you like, okay, I'm freaking out, but I'm managing it? Because I feel like that's such a young age to jump into it. So what were you?
I mean, I was so into it, and I'd worked on a bunch of student projects before and shot a bunch of student projects and done stuff on film. And I was like, I can do this. This is like my jam. Like, I'm so into this.
You were prepped and ready to go for that.
I was so ready to go.
So you talked a little bit about the different things that you've worked on. I guess maybe choose the thing that you enjoy doing best, whether it's films or, what have you. Can you kind of just map out like what a typical day is like for a cinematographer?
Okay. I guess your first question, what I like working on is I like working on scripted film. I like movies. I like the format. I like the 2 hours. I like everything that's involved with that. And what is involved in a full like prep, pre-production and shooting is a lot. It's a lot of work. It's like, pre-production involves deciding how you're going to shoot the movie with the director, deciding on what kind of shots you're going to do, whether it's movement or still or what's happening within. You're kind of imagining what's going to happen in the movie. I actually just was working with this director that we have an upcoming project together, and I just spent a week. We worked out the whole shot list of the movie, so that's super fun for me. That's like one of my favorite parts because it's like the dreaming part of it. You get to imagine and think, oh, if I had all the time in the world and all the money in the world, I could do all these cool things. When the reality comes around and you're shooting it, you have to pare it down quite a bit, but the dream is cool. So, and in pre-production, that's when you do all your hiring, you organize all your equipment, you break down the script of what you're going to need on what days. Sometimes you'll need big equipment, so you can only rent it for a certain amount of time. So you have to make sure that gets picked up and delivered to set and all of that kind of stuff. So all of that and all of the location scouting, you gotta go to all the locations, figure out all the logistics of that. Yeah. And then going into production that's my favorite part. I actually don't really like pre-production because there's like this anticipation of things about to happen or things going to happen. And things are going to go wrong. Things are going to be crazy. Hours are going to be nuts. You're going to forget all the things you wanted to do in the beginning, but it's super fun. Production is fantastic. I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do, which is arriving on set, making sure the camera department knows what's going on for the day. Every day is a different approach. Every day is going to be new challenges, new problems, all of those things. Yeah. And then making it happen, that moment where you've set everything up and the actors come to set and you just make those moments. And that's beautiful for me. That's like one of my favorite moments. And then through the course of production, every day is packed full of stuff and you get more and more tired as the end of the production comes around and you're really happy on the last day where you're like, I get to sleep finally after this is over. So yeah, I usually get sick right after we wrap and then I sleep for a week and then I'm okay.
You talked about how in pre-production you dream and you create like, if I had all of these things, like this is what we would do.
Yeah.
And then it changes a little bit once you're actually doing it and you see like the confines under which you're working. So how do you navigate that? Like, because our listeners are young, they're just starting out. And of course they enjoy dreaming and, oh, if we had this and if we had that. And like, how do you grow as an artist and kind of like creatively problem solve?
That's a big, complicated question. I would say that, you try to keep as much of the dream as you can while you're shooting with knowing, that you're going to have limitations and challenges. Piece of equipment didn't show up. Somebody didn't make it to set. Like, there's always going to be something. We ran out of time, the sunset, whatever, and so this is another one of my favorite parts of this job is like, yes, you have this dream, you try to execute it, and you have to be on your toes about how to problem solve the entire time. Like there's not a moment, there's not a shot where there's not something that's an issue. And you really just have to focus on what's important. You have to before you go into shooting, it's really great to just go over your project so many different times and figure out what are the moments that are most important in this project. Like what are we going to really spend our time on, and what are we going to, maybe just get through and maybe not use in the end. You have to really be specific about that because those moments come up a lot. And so you have to pick and choose the moments where you're like, we're going to spend the extra time it takes to get this complicated shot or get this thing to happen, because that's important. And it's good to, in pre-production, be specific about that, because while you're in production, you're tired, you're overworked, there's so much going on, you forget about who you are and where you are and what you're doing. So it's good to write all those things down and be like, oh yeah, in my notes I said this was really important that we do this one shot, so we should do that.
Yeah, you have to be honest with yourself as the creator, what's doable in the time allotted.
Yeah, and you got to be prepared to let some stuff go, and also be prepared to fight for what you think is important, because there's going to be a lot of people being like, hey, we have to move on, and you have to be like, no, this is really important, we have to get this shot. It's a constant conversation.
Now, you mentioned you did go to film school, right?
I did. Mm-hmm.
So what made you make that decision, and what benefits and maybe things that might have held you back potentially from going, or just tell us about the positives and negatives of going to film school, just for anybody who is thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I had a great time in film school. I met a lot of cool people. I made a lot of cool films, worked on a lot of projects, watched a lot of movies. That was one of the coolest parts, is we had a big theater and they were just playing movies all the time. And all the professors were super into film and film studies. And so we got to take films apart and discuss them. And that part was really cool. Did it really help me in my career? I'm not entirely sure that it did, but it certainly helped me in my life, as far as like being analytical about films and being able to talk about them, which is a big part. A lot of filmmaking is a lot of talking, And I did get some experience, setting up lights, getting familiar with C-stands and, what kind of lights were. And it was a good introduction, but I learned more working on my first film as a PA than I did probably my entire career at school. You just practical experience is so important, and you can learn things in theory, until the cows come home, but until you actually do it, that's when it like sinks in. That's when you get it. That's when you understand the functionality of all these things that are coming together to like make this moment happen. I wouldn't deter anybody from going to film school. I think it's wonderful. And it's also important to make those connections. And I know there's quite a few film schools that a lot of people, come out of the gate already connected to producers and directors and stuff like that. So there are good things about it, but there's a lot to be said for practical experience.
I agree.
When I was in acting school, you're in this like insulated, perfect world of like prepping and doing all of these things in like quiet. You don't have like a grip standing next to you as you're about, it's like so different than actually doing it on set. So I'll never forget that first like gig that I got, and you're like, oh, where's my room to prepare? Which leads us to our next question. So you talked a little bit about when you were a PA. What was your first gig? Was that your first gig, or
like being paid?
Like being paid for what you did?
So right out of college, I worked on this music video for a friend of mine as a second AC. And he had got this kind of like up and coming DP to shoot his music video. And the DP really liked me. So he was like, I have this feature that I'm shooting, if you're interested, I'd, throw your name in the hat or whatever. And I, of course, was like, yes, please. That sounds awesome. So I was actually pretty lucky because I had just moved to LA, and he called me and hired me for this 2-camera indie feature starring Bai Ling. I don't know if you guys know who that is, but she was kind of big in the 90s. Anyway, the whole camera department they were all union guys too. It was like union operators, union first. I was this like fresh newbie second AC. I didn't know what an eyepiece leveler was. I didn't know what anything was. They'd be like, go get this thing. I'd be like, okay, you know, I'd run and I'd look through the bag and be like, this, and they'd be like, no, they'd be like, this, they're like, no. And they really schooled me hard. You know, they would hit the slate out of my hand when I'd bring it into the shot. You know, if I didn't put it in the right space, they would make fun of me. If I didn't know what lens we were on and where to put the slate according to what lens we were on, they would be pissed at me. I mean, it was a learning experience. And 2 cameras is a lot to prep, and they helped me a lot, but I learned so much during that film. And that was, I mean, I think we shot for 2 months. I can't really remember now, but we went to all these different locations. We shot in this abandoned hospital. I mean, it was nuts. I'd never worked so much in my whole life. I mean, I was exhausted and I was super happy and I was learning so much. And from that job, I got other jobs. You know, I met everybody in the camera department, and then the next 3 features, I was a camera loader because we were still shooting film back then. And yeah, then I just started ACing and kind of working my way up in that way. And it's really about like connections with people. If you can get along with people, if you can, you know, be tolerable on set, if you're interested, if you're, you know, quick to help, all of that stuff is really important. And I learned that on my first film that I worked on. It was a crazy time. I was like, this is nuts. People do this for their jobs every single day. I love this. It's like total chaos, controlled chaos. And you're working with a bunch of like carnies that are just traveling around, like working on films. I mean, it's bananas. So I had a great time and I totally love doing it.
I feel like everybody focuses on the craft and the art, and they forget to talk about relationships and, you know, just etiquette about being in a working environment. You mentioned a couple different things, but like for the person that's listening right now who's going for their first gig or looking to get hired, like what are like 3 characteristics that you look for now, but like that you made sure that you did when you got your first job?
Yeah, good question. It's really, I look for, if I'm hiring somebody who's young, I like hiring young people because they're into it. Like if you're into it and you're excited about it, that's the most valuable thing, honestly, on a film. Somebody who's like willing to just be there and is happy about it, that's huge. You know, you don't want to hire the grumpy person who's like, oh, I'm too good to do this, or I don't want to move that box. Or you want the person that's like jumping in, doing more than you're asking them to do. It's like kind of like playing a sport where you want to anticipate the move. You know, you want to anticipate on set what your team is going to need. If you're in the camera department, if you're in the lighting department, it's like you be there with the thing in your pocket already to be like, oh, I have this thing. Like you want that person who's like doing the most. That's what I would recommend and what I do look for. And when I talk about, you know, hiring people with, you know, the production team, it's always like, we would rather hire somebody who is thirsty and hungry and is excited than somebody who's like tons of experience and is an asshole and doesn't want to do their job anymore.
Yeah, that doesn't help anybody.
No.
It doesn't make it a fun environment to come to work every day.
100%.
Yeah.
For kids and students who are looking to become a DP, what would you say is like the best resource or the best way for them to try and get their first gig?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to go about doing that. If you really want to get into DPing, you just have to shoot. You know, you got to shoot as much as you can. You got to take every project. You got to volunteer. The thing about DPing is like, it's hard to practice on your own. You kind of have to be involved in projects in order to, you know, try out things you want to do or, you know, get better at what you're doing. Of course, like there is the route where you are a camera assistant, you're a second, you're a first, you become a camera operator. You know, by the time you're done being a camera operator, you've been on set a ton of times. You've seen how other DPs have lit stuff. You kind of get a better sense of what you're doing. So that's the like traditional route of becoming a DP, but you can also just get out there and shoot stuff and play around with lights and shoot your friends' projects. Anything like that would work. But I think the traditional route of the like being on set and being able to observe what other people are doing, and I don't know if you get in some sort of like mentorship or something, that's helpful too. So
yeah, that's ideal.
yeah, you just every project you learn something on, which is awesome. And every project's different.
I love that idea of learning something from every project. I think that it's great to see it as an opportunity to continually learn. And I think that framing for people coming into the business is important too, because it's important to keep learning and growing and getting better. What would you say is the best part of your job?
I think probably working with really creative people, and yeah, it just is always something different. I'm always in a new place. I'm always in a new situation. It doesn't become mundane or boring. I mean, I guess if I worked on one set in one room for a long time, it would be boring, but which I did shoot a movie like that. We just shot all in one room and I was like, I hate this. This is boring. We made it interesting, but it was challenging. But I like that you're always going to this beautiful place to shoot, because that's where you shoot stuff, where it's beautiful and you spend the whole day there, or it's just always something fresh. I like the freshness of it. And the people that I work with are smart and creative and love excitement and are really hard, dedicated workers. And I love that.
What would you say is the most difficult part of your job?
The most difficult part is maybe not having enough time or resources to do the things that you want to do. That's really challenging and frustrating when you have all this stuff that you want to accomplish and the day's over, or you can't do these certain things because it's not in the budget. That part to me is really hard, and the long hours are hard. Yeah.
How do you move past that when you're in a situation where the specific thing that you want to do, and like how do you kind of manage that? Because that's another skill that, I guess our listeners will probably need to, rather than get fixated on something, like how do you learn to kind of roll with the punches?
That is a lifelong lesson. I don't know how to answer that other than sometimes you just gotta let it go. You got to keep your priorities clear in your mind. And like I said before, fight for the things that are important and let the other things just slide, because a lot of it is letting it slide. Because at the end of the day, you have to complete a project. You can't just be fixated on one thing. You have to keep the whole thing in your head rather than just get myopic about it.
I think that's important. Thank you. So we think this next question is very important, specifically for women, but also for creatives as a whole. If you could talk a little bit about like the range in pay for someone who's starting out as a DP, someone who, gets a little bit further along in their career. We want women to feel comfortable talking about money and talking about what they're worth.
Yeah, I mean, there's such a range, when you're starting out as a DP, and it really depends on the project. Like if you're shooting your friend's feature, you might be making $100 a day. Feel good about that, because you're also adding to your resume. It's not always you're just getting paid to do something. You're like, it's almost like someone's paying you to like go to school. You have to kind of like look at those projects that you're shooting for free or shooting for $100 a day. But, it goes up. Like once you get a couple of projects under your belt and you can negotiate a little bit more, you're probably not going to have an agent who's going to be negotiating for you. So when you get into indie features, I mean, there's not a lot of pay there either. Like you're making probably $500 to $1,000 a day. Like $1,000 would be great for an indie feature, but it's usually around like 500, 650, 750, something like that. And that goes for like a lot of docuseries stuff too. Like an average DP pay on a docuseries is probably $750, $800 a day. And then commercials are a little different because you get paid a little bit more because they're shorter. So you could be making anywhere, from like $800 to $2,000 a day, depending on what the project is. And of course, the more experience you have, the more you're going to be making, the more you can ask for, and so it comes along with, maybe your first couple of jobs, you're not sure how much you should be making, but once you kind of get a couple of projects under your belt, then you kind of understand what you can ask for. And it's hard because, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of people who want to do your job. So a lot of it is relationships with producers, with directors that and then kind of fighting for what you can get paid. And I remember when I started making like $500 a day, I was like, oh, this is awesome. Anyway, so it really varies. It changes so quickly. And then, if you ask for too much money, then they're like, oh, we don't want to hire you. You don't own a camera or whatever. That helps when you have a camera and you have a little leverage and you can include that in your day rate or your package.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you have a package or a few packages that you offer to your directors?
I actually don't. And I just, technology changes really quickly. And I like to use kind of like the whatever state of the art is at the moment. So I haven't invested in anything like that. But for the DPs that I know that have invested in that, it's a good, you get a rental on top of your salary. So It's a good move if you can afford it and want to do that. And I know people, sometimes I talk to production companies and they're like, oh, you don't own your own equipment? Like, nope, it's going to be an additional rental. And like, can't understand why I wouldn't have my own stuff, but
No, I understand because as you said, it's always evolving and changing, and like what you got yesterday is tomorrow's trash. So it's like
absolutely.
So true.
But I think for people starting out, if we're talking to an audience of young people, it's a good idea if you can afford it. It's not necessary. You don't have to own your own equipment. But it's a bargaining point.
How do you guys feel about negotiating, and do you think it's important? And, how do you determine if you should push a little bit more or, kind of know that this is what they have and that's the end of it?
Again, it's specific on what's happening. If you know the production company, if you can really ask somebody, be like, honestly, like what's in the budget? And it really comes down to what's in the budget. Sure, if they're in between a rock and a hard place and they really need to hire you for something, you might have a little bit more leverage. I remember I didn't want to do this one docuseries job. I really didn't want to do it. So I was like, I made my price high. I was like, they're never going to offer me this. I'm like, I won't do it unless you pay me $1,000 a day. Didn't think they were going to do it because they were offering me $750. And then they were like, okay, we'll call you back. And then they called back and they're like, okay, we'll do it. I was like, what? No, I didn't want to do this. And then I was like, oh, you can do stuff like that when you don't want it so badly, you can really like up your leverage. But most of the time I want to do the project. So I'm like, I usually buy what they're selling because I believe that people are telling the truth. And maybe that's, I don't know, not a good place to be in, but I'm usually like, this is what's in the budget. Maybe there's a little flexibility. Sometimes you can do a little flexibility if you have rentals and you can adjust things from there. But, if something feels like you don't want to do it for a certain amount of money, don't do it. I think it comes down to like a gut feeling too, where you're like, oh, this seems like low. Then I think it's good to be like, no, I'm not going to do it for this much money. I think my rate is this thing. But it's, talking about money it's hard. It's hard.
But if you never say no to people, then the rates will never change. So you have a good point.
Yeah.
Kate and I ask each of our guests, what do you feel needs to change in this industry? Things that are problematic for you, your position, your job, or just things that you've noticed over the years?
Yeah. I think the biggest issue is the long hours, which the union is fighting to get us better hours. It's tricky though, because there is so much to do every day. So I understand why there's long hours and everything takes a really long time. It would be nice to have it capped at a certain amount with the expectation that they would add more days to a schedule. But everybody wants to shoot everything for, faster, cheaper, easier, less people, less time. So I would like to see the industry encourage longer shooting periods and shorter days. 16-hour days is hard. 12 is doable. 12 is I feel like pretty average.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone in that sentiment.
Definitely
For
not.
sure. Yeah.
I don't know how you fight capitalism, but we're trying.
I guess you just keep trying.
It's just do you think it's a habit, or do you think it's oh, this is how it's always been done, so it's just a perpetual habit? Or do you think that there is the opportunity for change? People are seeing that it can be done differently.
Well, I think there are strength in numbers. And when we can come together and be like, we're not going to do it for this. It has to involve everybody, though, because there's always those people that are like, oh, well, I'll do it for that, slip in there and, make it happen. But I think that if we keep asking for it, if we keep fighting for it, if we keep on it, I think we can change anything.
What do you think is the best advice you've received?
Moving in the direction of your dreams was something that somebody said to me that I was like, oh yeah, that's good. And doesn't mean moving in the direction is an important part of it, because it's not always about the end goal, but it's moving towards that thing that you think you're dreaming about, you're wanting, you're desiring, you think is going to be great. It's to go in that way is important, and to keep doing that and to not give up. I mean, sure, you can change your mind and be like, that's not my dream anymore, I want to do something else, but that's always the case. It can be the case, but I think, yeah, keeping what it is that you want to do in your mind and moving in that direction.
It's everything matters too. Everything that you're doing is really important, because it's
Absolutely.
moving you in the direction of your dreams. So, being a PA, starting there, all of these other little steps, everyone always thinks giant leaps, but it's all the little things in between that you learn the most. So
I think it's a Walt Whitman quote, move in the direction of your dreams. But you bring up a good point, which is everything that you do is leading to something, even if it feels like it's completely off the wall. I've done some jobs, I've jumped around. I didn't always do the camera department. I was in the art department. I wanted to figure out, other places I could, learn more. Lighting department, editing, I've done a bunch of different stuff, and all of those things build on everything else. I thought when I actually left the camera department and I went to the art department and started set decorating and production designing and all that kind of stuff. And when I came back to the camera department, all of that stuff influenced how I shot, which I wasn't anticipating, and was like, oh, this is interesting that all of this stuff kind of gets fused together. So whatever you do, it all builds to something.
I love it. So this is the least popular question. Everyone's we always get pushback on this one, but because it is a hard question. So what would you say is your favorite film or films of all time, or things that have really impacted you creatively, that have inspired you to pursue things or try things, take risks, etc.?
Yeah, well, one of my favorite films of all time is In the Mood for Love, which is a Wong Kar-wai movie shot by Christopher Doyle. It's beautiful, and it's a magical film, and they use color and texture, and the storytelling is really perfect, and then music and everything just comes together. I think that was a big influence on me and how I shoot, and also what I like creatively. I love all Wong Kar-wai's films. They have all that beautiful qualities to them, and they're all shot really interesting. And that, and also Delicatessen is one of my all-time favorite movies, just because it's so imaginative and it's so creative, and the camera is creative, and yeah, everything in it is just, to me, like this pinnacle of film art making and what's possible. Because at the end of the day, film is about what's not possible. You know, we can make things happen that aren't real in real life. And I love that part of it. And I love that kind of surrealistic place that it can take you to, because yeah, it gets to afford what a feeling is like rather than what reality feels like. And that part I really like. So I think films that can achieve that are my favorite.
That's awesome. I'm gonna have to check Delicatessen out because I haven't seen
Oh,
it.
it's so good. Did you see
Oh.
Amelie?
Yes.
Okay, so his first movie, Pierre Junot,
Yep.
was Delicatessen, and they got short ends from some film that somebody else worked on, and they shot the whole movie with short ends, which short ends means like if you're shooting on film, you have these huge rolls of 1,000-foot magazines, and you know, you shoot most of it and then you take the end of it out because you don't want to run out of film. So they take
Right.
all of those ends, which are like 100 feet, 150 feet, which is like a minute or two. They shot the whole movie like piecemeal of all these short ends, and it's
Amazing.
beautiful. It's like so, it's a magical movie.
Sweet.
I can remember being in acting school and my teacher was like, I can't talk to you because you've never seen any of these things. And the whole class was like, okay. And one time she actually told us all to go home because we hadn't seen this thing. And it was like so dramatic. But it was like a lesson. It's like, you need to know, you need to see things, see films, see things that, you know, other people recommend. And, you know, it helps inform who you are as an artist. So I always think that it is a tough question, but it's important.
Wait, you don't remember what the film was that she sent you home to watch?
I don't know. It was
She was so bummed. She's
it
like,
was
"I don't
it was
remember
a
what it was."
film, Tender Mercies with Robert Duvall.
Never seen it.
Okay. Thanks, Bianca. Bye-bye.
I'll have to watch it.
Yeah. So Robert Duvall. Anyway, thank you so much. This was a
Well,
blast
thank you.
talking to you. And
It
it's
is.
always inspiring seeing people talk about the things that they love to do. It's so obvious that you love what you do. So thanks for sharing that with us and with
pleasure.
our listeners. Thanks so much for listening to 101, a podcast, and we'll see you next time.